Morning. I don't know if you can really stay nervous after a worship service like that. Well, my name is Katie Miller, and Pastor Stephen nicely asked me to come and speak about who I am, what I do, and why I do it. So I grew up in East Springfield, Pennsylvania, which, if you don't know where that is, you're in the same boat as everybody else. It is about as northwestern Pennsylvania as you can get. Like, there's West Springfield and North Springfield, and that's pretty much it. And so, the little tiny town, and I mean, we don't have a stoplight, but we did get a Dollar General a few years ago, and that was a big deal. They really are everywhere. And so I grew up with my 5 siblings, and my brothers did baseball growing up, and I did ballet classes, and we were all homeschooled. And so this is my first social interaction. I don't know what's going to go on. So yeah, we grew up, and ever since the age of 6 years old, I always said that I wanted to be a missionary to India. And that's just always been a thing in my mind. I've always said it, and some people as children would say that they want to be mailmen or doctors. I always said that I wanted to be a missionary to India. So I started doing short-term missions trips when I was 13. I believe my first one was to West Virginia. And when I was 15, I went to my mom and I said, "Mama, the youth group is doing a missions trip to Cambodia, which is in Southeast Asia." And I was like, "I want to go on it." And my mom is very laid back, very chill mom, coolest lady ever. She says, "Yeah, go ahead, go have fun." And I said, "Mom, I'm only 15, you gotta come with me." And she was like, "All right, let's do this." And so I like to say that I got my mom into missions. I kind of roped her in, and now she's been on a bunch of missions trips with me, and a few on her own, so she's growing up so fast. So we went on my first international missions trip to Cambodia, and I've just been doing short-term missions trips ever since. And upon graduating high school, I thought that it would be a good idea to have a bit of a side job. Like Paul had tent making that he could always fall back on in case his ministry had a bit of a lull. And so I decided that I would go into nursing. And so I went to nursing college, and I was about 6 months into schooling when I had a moral disagreement with my college. They wanted me to do something that I was uncomfortable with and I wasn't okay doing. And I said, "I'm not going to get that done." And they said, "Yeah, you are." And I said, "No, I'm not." And they said, "Well, we're done here." And so I was kicked out of college and pretty much thrown through a loop because I don't know if you've ever had a plan with God that you were like, we were chill, we were great, and then he just flips it all upside down. I don't know if you ever do that. He just kind of flipped up everything upside down, and I was completely at a loss of what to do. So I went to my pastor, and I was like, "I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to do with my I don't know what to do." And she said something important to me. She said, "Katie, if you were my daughter, I would tell you to get out. Get out of Erie County, Pennsylvania, go and do mission work, do what you're called to do." And I took that to my prayer group. And I was like, "This is what my pastor said. Can you guys pray for me? Can you help me in any way?" And the leader of the prayer group just so happens to be an Indian woman from our church. And she was like, "Let me get back to you." And she brought back to me, she got in contact with one of her friends from India whose parents still live in India. And her parents go to the same church as a man who runs a children's home, which is in the same campus as a school. And they got me in contact with the principal at the school. So to help you out, I knew a guy who knew a guy whose parents knew a guy who knew another guy. And that's how I got to India, which was just an amazingly crazy, that's just how God works sometimes. It was just so crazy. So I got in contact with this principal, and he was like, "We'd love to have you come and teach at our school. Do you have a teaching license?" And I was like, "No." And then he said, "Well, we need a dance teacher. Can you teach dance?" And this is just like such a God moment because I had been dancing since I was 3 years old. And if you don't think that God prepares your children from the moment that they're born, like I was 3 years old. Did my mom know when she put me into dance classes that I was going to be using that to get to India? I'm sure she didn't, but God did. The whole time he had a plan. And I actually had to stop dancing when I went into college. I had a job and it was busy. And I remember talking to God and I was like, well, why did you have me stop? Like the late nights, the sore feet, the gas miles that my parents had to drive, like all of that hard work. And what was it for? What have I done? Like there was nothing that dancing went to. But when that principal was like, here, can you be a dance teacher? It was just a God moment. And so that opened the door to where I was able to go to India and teach dance at their school. And I had a wonderful 5th grade class, which if you've ever tried to teach 11-year-old children, they don't always focus, but it was a little challenging. But we made it happen and it was awesome and it was great. And after 4 months of me teaching there, they were like, you got to go home. Your fair American skin cannot handle the heat of Indian summers. And so they sent me back home. And I came back and I was once again at a bit of a loss of what to do. I knew I wanted to still do mission work and I felt called to the unreached people of the world, but I didn't know where God wanted me to go. And the same pastor actually suggested I go on a missions trip to Kenya that our church was doing. And kind of my impression of that was like, really? Kenya? Like, don't all Christians go to Kenya? Like when you think of a Christian going on a missions trip to Africa, you think like Kenya and you think Uganda. That's pretty much it. Like I think that Kenya's pretty Christianized at this point. Can we think of something a little bit more interesting? But no. And I love doing short-term trips, so I went anyway with the team. And our team went to the Maasai tribe and we built a church. Well, I didn't build it, but part of the team built it, a church. And the rest of us went out and did VBSs with the children and went and canvassed telling everybody that there was going to be a new church service on Sunday. And so we were able to do that for about a week and a half-ish. And the Sunday came and it was just a beautiful church service. And it was just amazing, and we just got to meet the new congregation of people that could just walk to church, and it was just wonderful. But one of the last days we were there, the missionary there invited us to come to a school that he's been running that teaches English as a second language, as well as elementary school children, to the Somali population of Nairobi, which is the capital city of Kenya. And so we got to go and walk down the streets of Nairobi, and as I walked down the streets, it just kind of reminded me of India. And I was walking down, and I was like, wow, this looks a lot like India. This looks a lot like back home. And I just kind of threw that in the back of my head, and we went and we spoke to the people of that school, and it was just wonderful. But I came to know that the Somali population. Now, Somalia has been in civil war for many years, and Kenya has taken in the most amount of refugees. And a lot of them have congregated to this area of Nairobi. In fact, there's about 350,000 of them living there. And they're majoritatively Muslim. And there's not a lot of churches there, and it's pretty much an untapped place with Christianity. And so I had not seen that when I thought of Kenya. I had seen like all the missionaries that have gone there. I saw the fact that it was very Christianized, but God saw the Somali people. And I had forgotten about them, but God never did. So I came home and I felt the calling of God to go back. And so then that was about last September, and this January, our team from our church did another missions trip to Cambodia. And we got there late at night, middle of the night. It was everybody was tired from the long journey. We got out of the airport, we got into the vans and started driving to our hotel. And I looked out the window of our van and I looked at the streets of Cambodia. And I said, wow, this looks a lot like India. This looks a lot like home. Which is totally bizarre because across thousands of miles, across pretty much 2 oceans, 2 continents, 3 different streets, 3 different cities look the same. And in this, God was kind of saying to me, Katie, it's not just the geographical location, it's not just India where you're called, that there are lost people everywhere, and you're called to the lost people. And I remember back from when I was in Kenya and how I had forgotten about the Somali people or just not seen them in society, and it reminds me of why I do missions. Now, if you were to ask a few different missionaries, they might give you a few different answers of why they do missions personally. But why I do missions, I think is kind of best told in a story. While we were in Cambodia, we did a banquet for women who work in prostitution. And we were able to give them just a night off where they could eat good food. We gave them these cute little bags that had just little gift bags. They were, cheap. They didn't cost much. They were just like toiletry items and like nail polish and things like that. But to these women, we were able to give them just a night off to relax, to talk to people, and to just feel the love of God. And it reminded me that there are people forgotten by society, whether that be that society turns away from them or they just have forgotten about them in their day-to-day life. But God has never forgotten about his lost people. In fact, he seeks them out individually. Remember in the Bible where he sought out the Samaritan woman at the well, and he sought out Zacchaeus, and he said, I'm going to your house tonight. I'm going to honor you. And so in that, we were able to give them the love of God and remind them that they were never forgotten. That I have forgotten about people. I didn't know about the Somali people. But God never forgot about his children. And I'm sure that if you thought back in your life, that you can remember how God sought you out. And sometimes he seeks us out more than once. And just over and over again, he's always willing to run after you. And so if God is willing to do that for us, if God first loved us, are we not then to love our brothers and sisters and to love others? And so that's why I do missions, because people have been forgotten and neglected and falling through the cracks of society. But it's my job as a Christian and as someone in missions to seek them out and to run after them and show them the love of God. See now where I was in my notes. Sometimes I go on a long tangent and I don't actually know where I went with my notes. So that's why I do missions. But why do we as a church do missions? Well, I actually want to point out someone in the Bible that did sort of mission work, and he's kind of an unlikely person. His name is Nehemiah. And so if you want to turn to Nehemiah in your Bibles. Now, to give you some context, the Israelite people had been thrown into exile into Babylon. And they have been in Babylon, been in exile for many years, and the main generation of Israelites are starting to die away, and the new generation are coming up. But actually, before we go to Nehemiah, I want to actually turn to Habakkuk. Now, the book of Habakkuk is kind of a back and forth with the prophet and God as kind of a conversation. And God starts to tell Habakkuk, this is before the exile, but he starts to tell them about the exile and how his people have turned away from him. And so he's going to let the Babylonians, these ruthless people, come and take them. And so, but something really interesting comes up. He gives a glimmer of hope in that sad, sad time. And God says to him in Habakkuk 1, verse 5, oh, I just love this verse. It says, look at the nations and watch, and be utterly amazed, for I am going to do something in your day that you would not believe, even if you were told. Now, I actually read this verse for the first time a few years ago, and I almost challenged God. I don't know if you've ever done that. It's not a good idea. But I kind of said, really? Even if they were told they wouldn't believe? Well, but you're God. Like, you're not going to lie to me. If you told me something that was going to happen in my life or in the world, I feel like I could believe you. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah, I mean, like, I could believe you. And he was like, okay, I want you to imagine as far out as you can. Think of the craziest things that are going to happen in your life, craziest scenarios, and I'm going to take you farther than that, because you could not imagine the things that are going to happen. You could not imagine the things that are going to go on. And that's kind of a game I play with God now. It's like an imaginary, see how far we can go. But in this, he was talking about the Israelite people, and then right after, they go into exile. And so if I was told that, I'd be like, what you doing here, God? Like, you said you're going to do something amazing, and yet we're in exile now. And so then we catch up with the unlikely character of Nehemiah. And so they've been in exile for a few years, and in comes this guy, Nehemiah. Who is he? He's just the cupbearer to the king of Babylon, his captor. He's the cupbearer to him. And one day, his brother comes to him, and they're chatting, and they're sitting down and hanging out. And he says, brother, how are the people of Jerusalem? And his brother responds in chapter 1, verse 3, and he says, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire. So these people that are still living in Jerusalem, their wall is broken down, they're being bullied by their neighbors, and they're just in a really bad spot. And this just breaks Nehemiah to his core. He goes on in the chapter to just cry out to God, saying, I know that my people have done bad things, my family has sinned, I have sinned, but you said that you would come back to us if we came back to you. You said you'd come back. And he's just so distraught about this, so much so that the king notices how sad he is. And the king is like, dude, what's going on? Like, this isn't just that you're like, your face isn't just like that you're sick. You must be like, your heart must be really hurting. And this scares Nehemiah because, like, this is your captor, this is the king. Why is he asking about me? But he tells him what's on his mind. He tells him that his people are being persecuted, that the wall of Jerusalem, the place of his forefathers, is just in ruin. And the king, I kind of love what he says. He's just like, well, what do you want me to do about it? Like, what do you want? And Nehemiah is like, I want to go and rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and build back the honor of my people, which is a crazy request to ask. Like, these are your captors. These guys, this is the guy that probably broke down the wall to begin with. If not, his father was the one to go and destroy the wall. Like, you can't just ask your enemy that you can go back and build your battlement back up. Crazy question to ask. But the king is like, well, how long would you be gone? And he's like, he gives him a time, and he's like, okay, you can go. What? You can't just let him go? Needless to say, he goes. And not only that, he lets him have wood from the royal forest and a letter to the neighboring areas saying that he's allowed to go and allowed to rebuild the wall. And then he gives them an army escort. Like, what in the world? This is your captor. He should not be doing this. But he did. He got the favor from the king, and he went to Jerusalem. He goes at night and looks at the wall of Jerusalem and kind of just takes in what he's dealing with here. And the people with him don't really know why they're there. They're just kind of like, hey, king's paying me. I'm here. But we catch up to him. He went in and looked at the wall and came back to the people, and we're going to address this group of people that's with him. Let's see now. So we're back to Nehemiah 17. Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins, with its gates burned. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer suffer derision. And I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me for good, and also of the words that the king had spoken to me. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they put their hands to the good work. This is another crazy thing, because if you said to me, hey bro, we're gonna go build a wall around the city. I know it's really hot out right now. We don't have any modern equipment, but we're just gonna all go do that. I know there's a bunch of neighbors threatening to kill us, but that's fine. We're gonna go build a wall. I mean, I don't know what you would say, but I might be like, that's a little odd. But no, these guys were totally in. They were ready. They were excited to work. They put their hands to the good work. These guys were skipping their lunch breaks, ready to go and do the good work. And so we then go to chapter 3. Now, you might be inclined to skip chapter 3 because it's kind of like the he begats, like he begat him, who begat him, and it can be kind of boring, honestly. It can be boring. But there's a few things that I actually want to point out in chapter 3. Now, chapter 3 starts to list off the people that came, the Israelites that came to build the wall. And it lists out so-and-so and his family. They built this section of the wall, and they built that section of the wall. But there's a couple things I want to point out. First of all, he didn't list actually any builders. He didn't list any, he listed random people. He listed merchants that came, these governors came, this one man and his daughters came, just a bunch of random Joes came and built this wall. And even Nehemiah's servants came to build this wall. So from the governors to the servants, everyone was there building this wall because they believed in the mission. And then we come to chapter 3, verse 5. And it says, and next to them the Tekoites repaired, but their nobles would not stoop to serve their Lord. Wow. When I read this, I was at a bit of a shock that this was like a burn from like thousands of years ago, that he left this in the Bible. This is the most read book of all time, and he left that in there. I imagine this to be the scene that he's typing, that Nehemiah is there typing on his typewriter. He obviously had a typewriter. And so he's like, oh, Bill from Judah, how are you? How is the wife? How are the kids? Oh, thank you so much for coming. You want to go build over there? And then, oh my gosh, Jeff the Tekoite, how are you? Oh, wait, where's Bob? Yeah, Bob, the governor, one of the nobles. Where's he? Oh, he didn't come. Ready? Why? Why didn't he come? Was he busy? Was he like doing something? No, he wasn't. He just didn't want to come. Oh, okay. Left that in there. Left it in the script. And so the Tekoite leaders didn't stoop to serve their Lord. And so even without the Tekoite leaders, the Israelites worked very hard. And even with the threat of death from their neighbors, they actually finished the wall in 52 days. 52 days, just under 2 months, they finished the wall around the entire city, which is crazy. So this whole story is just crazy, maybe even more than if you were able to be told. Even if someone were to say, hey, we're going to build this wall in 52 days, we're going to get the favor of our captors, they're going to let us go and build this wall, I might say that's crazy. I don't believe you. But it happened. And they finished the mission. The mission that God gave Nehemiah, the mission was finished. But what was the mission? Was the mission to build the wall? Or was the mission to build back the honor and strength of the Israelite people? So was Nehemiah, when he was praying to God, distraught about the wall? Was he so sad that there were burn marks on his wall? No, he was distraught about his people and the fact that their honor was taken from them and that they had been persecuted. So his mind was on the people and not on the physical. So this was the mission sent from God. And actually, it's kind of a theme throughout the Bible. This idea of not having it be about the wall or the fact that this guy got eaten by a whale. It wasn't about that. It was about his people. It was about God's people and them coming back to himself. And you see that countless times in the Bible where people ran away from him and he was just so intent on bringing them back. And actually, there's a few verses that reflect this. In Ephesians 1:4-5, it says that he chose us in him before the foundations of the world. In love, he predestined us for adoption to sonship. In Revelation 13:8, it says that he wrote down your name in the book of life before the foundations of the world. In Jeremiah 1:5, it says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. So, you think before Mary and Joseph, before the rebuilding of the wall, before the original wall, before Moses, before Adam and Eve, before the very foundations of the world itself, what was there? There was God, and there was this desperate love for you. His mission was never about the things. It was always about his desperate love for his people, his willingness to do whatever it takes and run after that one sheep that was gone. He was always intent on getting you back. And so this is the mission. When you say, I went on a missions trip, when you say I do mission work, when you say I'm in ministry, what are you talking about? This is the mission. The mission is that we were loved so much that we were sought out and we were found by God, and that we are so appreciative that we want to go and seek out our brothers and sisters that are also lost and bring them back to the love of God. And so this was the mission. And I need to find the rest of my notes. There we are. So I imagine at the end of the world for there to be credits, like a movie. So I imagine like the last trumpets to blare and us to go up to heaven and the world goes black and then the credits start to roll. I don't know if you think of it that way, but I got this image in my head, and I imagine like your name to come up in big bold letters and then things listed down below your name. Like who you prayed for, who you poured into, who you knew when they were struggling, and you brought them some delicious dinner. What does it say under your name? And it just came to me like, what does it say under my name? When I get to heaven and I stand before God, what will he say to me? Will he say, well done, my wonderful daughter, I'm so proud of you? Or will he say, you never stooped to serve me? That was put into the Bible, the most read book of all time. And so when we serve God, how much will our names be put into the chronicles of the world when we stoop to serve the Lord? Or will it say, will he say, I never knew you? That you might have gone on a missions trip, you might have worked hard, and you might have given to a missionary going to Kenya, but did you do it for my glory or did you do it for your glory? And so it just reminded he reminded kind of me of why I do things. Am I doing it for my own glory or am I doing it for God's glory? Will it be listed things like they never really did things for my honor? Or will it be listed all the names of the people I served because I was so excited to get them back to the Father?